Raiders. 24-0. Welcome on in. It is the Silver and Zach podcast. I am the Ebony to the Ebony and Ivory because they call me Black Araya because people say I sound black. I'm not sure why, but I'll be the Ebony, and that would make Sean O'Connell the Ivory. He is on Twitter at Real OCSports. I'm on Twitter at Zak Sports, ZAK Sports. OC, I've heard this narrative for a long time throughout my 39 years on this planet. And it often comes from, well, actually, to be honest with you, it comes from both Raiders fans and Raiders haters. And what they both are in agreement in is that when they travel and they have a 10 a.m. California time or Las Vegas time, 10 a.m. start, that no matter who they're playing, do not feel good about the game because they are probable to implode. And what we saw on Sunday was disgusting. 24-0. And you rarely see Derek Carr. Normally he's very calm and he doesn't say anything controversial. He's a man of faith, OC. Cookie cutter kind of guy, but a guy that you can get around. He's also a competitor, but he normally is not negative. He was distraught after this game, said it was unacceptable. Apparently, Mark Davis and McDaniel, who apparently could be on the hot seat already, had a meeting before the press conference. And then fittingly, the lights went out during McDaniel's press conference. And I don't know what to say. 24-0, just a complete stinker, OC.
They've yet to win on the road at all. Never mind the time zone, right? So that's not a good commentary for this Raider team. You appear to be regressing, which I think is more problematic and more alarming than anything else. At this point in the year, when you have some injuries piling up, you'll see like the ups and downs, right? But it would appear that this Raider team is sliding backwards from what they're truly capable of. I mean, I did not come into the season with a ton of faith that they were going to be contenders in their own division, that they were going to be contenders in the AFC. They don't look like they can beat like the 8 best college teams with performances like this one. Then I hate that narrative. I despise that narrative, obviously, because every NFL player is an elite college player. So we know that you can't actually compare the apples and the oranges. But when you're putting up 145 yards passing in an NFL football game, when you're generating no pressures, no sacks, 2 tackles for loss out of 70-something defensive snaps, you're not creating any havoc for an opposing offense. By the way, that is led by the Ginger Ninja himself, Andy Dalton.
Ginger Ninja. Yeah, it was bad, OC. And you mentioned no sacks and only 2 tackles for loss for the Raiders. The Saints on the other, I mean, this was a coming back to earth moment for the offensive line for the Raiders, which is what we've been talking about since week 1. But they had looked dominant as Jacobs was looking like one of the best running backs in the league. And they were talking about what gifts he was going to get him on Christmas. But talk about falling back to earth, OC. They allowed 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 7 pass deflections. 7 pass deflections. Meanwhile, you got Josh Jacobs, 10 carries for 43 yards, 4.3 on the ground is not awful, but it's certainly not great. And then worst of all, you have your shiny new toy that you got in the offseason, 1 catch for 3 yards for Devontae Adams. You know he's got to be frustrated. He's used to being, I mean, they haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time in Green Bay, but he's used to being the number 1 seed and having a bye and definitely being in the playoffs, wild card in the very least. And you know he's got to be frustrated. They sit at 2-5. Gone are the dreams and hopes that I talked about of them having a lengthy winning streak before the schedule gets a little bit tough. I'm not saying the season's over, but they're going to have to not only win the games that they're supposed to win. Why, hell, I don't even know what a game is that they're supposed to win anymore. I don't know if they're going to be favorites against any of these teams. But the games that I look at and think or thought before the year that they should win, they definitely have to win, and then they're going to have to sneak in some games where you would expect them to lose. They're going to have to upset those games too.
This Raider team right now, you should shift your focus. If they're talking about instability with the head coaching position and you're having special meetings and The one that I haven't heard of yet, and you can correct me if I'm just out of the loop, but I haven't heard of the players only meeting yet. That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate sign. That's the panic button that you hit, right? When you hear like, oh, Raiders held a players only meeting. The captains called this, coaches, executives, trainers, everyone was left out, and it was the players getting right with each other and hammering out their differences or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's what the Nets did right before Steve Nash got fired.
The players only meeting in the NFL or in college football or in high school for that matter is like the ultimate sign of dysfunction. Now, it's an effort to eliminate dysfunction, so maybe that's what this Raider team needs, but I haven't heard of that one yet. We're on the precipice of getting that from these Raiders, and when that happens, and you look at the record overall, you look at the road record, you look at the lack of faith that this team has in its coach, you look at the lack of faith this team has in some of its star, highest paid players. As a fan, the thing you should start preparing yourself right now is the tanking campaign, the hold out for Hooker or whoever you think is the best college quarterback, whoever you think is the number 1 overall draft pick. You need to start coming up with your catchphrase on how you want to tank for Tua, all right? Because it's looking hideously ugly for this Raider team. And the brief flashes of hope that I was trying to cling to on the horizon in their more positive performances, this one against a Saints team that is drastically underwhelming made me just want to give up all hope. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here.
Lose for Lawrence. Yeah, I mean, I know that they're saying this is a quarterback-rich draft, but are you at that point now? You're done with Carr because you just signed him to a contract. You're going to have to trade him. You can't just cut him.
Well,
or are you talking about bringing a guy in, drafting him high, and then having him sit for a year behind Carr, sit for a year or two behind Carr, kind of like what Green Bay did when they drafted Love in the first round, but Love's certainly not looking like he's going to be the heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers.
Well, here's what I said from the very beginning, right? I don't think that Derek Carr is the solution, but I don't think Derek Carr is the problem either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the more realistic situation here would be for the Raiders to tank for the top pick and then trade that pick to someone who absolutely is in love with CJ Stroud or whoever, and then, stockpile some picks, move back, draft some offensive linemen,
defense too, secondary. Yep.
Do whatever you got to do, right? But I'm a fan of building from the ground up, and Derek Carr is exactly the kind of quarterback that you can do that with, right? Because he's good enough to help you win games if the personnel around him is solid. He's not the kind of guy that if you got rookie offensive linemen, he's not detrimental to their development. He's helping bring them along, right? He's the right kind of leader in a locker room to help young players establish themselves in the league. And then, of course, the brutal business that it is, all that work that he puts in, someone else gets rewarded with, right? It's kind of the Alex Smith equation, where he's a guy who just does everything the right way and helps you win, but then someone says, but we've reached our ceiling with this person, so now we're going to start Colin Kaepernick, or we're going to start Patrick Mahomes, or we're going to start whoever, right? Like that's probably where I put Derek Carr now. He's not the problem, but he's certainly not the solution. He can be part of your rebuild and your retooling. You gotta get a bunch of draft picks, though.
Yeah, I hate talking about the offseason already. I mean, I guess.
I understand that people.
No, I know. It's so early. I mean, we're talking about, 7 weeks into the season. We're talking about the draft already. I'm looking at it like this. At Jaguars, again, the Raiders on the East Coast starting at 10 a.m., never a good thing. But at the Jaguars, then at home against the Colts, who are just brutal, somehow just sat Matty Ice for the whole year. Didn't even say like we're benching him. Said like flat out he's never going to start unless there's an injury. And then they're at the Broncos, who have been a complete circus. And then it gets a little dicey. At the Seahawks, the Chargers have been pretty disappointing. The Rams have been disappointing. The Patriots are beatable. The Steelers have been terrible. And then you got the Niners and the Chiefs. So I'm saying the season's not totally lost, but yeah, they're going to have to turn it around ASAP. And there's nothing, OC, to walk away from that game when you get Jarrett Stidham in the damn game and you lose 24-0. You don't score a freaking point. And your leading receiver is Mac Hollins. You throw for 173 yards. You rush for 38. That's a total of damn near less than 200 yards. 211 yards is what you total in that game. And I was just watching, and it was like every time the car dropped back, there was somebody in the backfield. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't get anything going. Nothing. It was disgusting. And it was like, it was disgusting at 10:30 in the morning. I hadn't even had my breakfast yet.
And you know what? They did the thing that I hate NFL teams doing, and I hate college teams doing, and they got behind by 17 points, and they decided, 17 points, we might as well be down by 600. We're definitely not going to try and establish the run. I understand it wasn't working. I understand that it wasn't really going easy, but Jacobs, you already mentioned, 4 yards a carry is a respectable clip, right? That's not game-breaking stuff, but that's something that you can maybe build a little bit of rhythm and then keep a defense honest, and it opens it up for Devontae. Whatever it is, you just help Carr out.
Yeah.
They abandoned it too early. This will be like the ring the bell. I'm talking about it again. It's the redundancy, but I understand the reluctance for people to be like, especially Raider fans, be like, no, you can't start talking about the offseason. Your ceiling this year is mediocrity. You've already dug yourself a hole to the point where you are going to be probably, realistically, third in your division at best. And that's including comparing you to a stank-ass Broncos team right now. They are bad.
Yeah, I don't know. The Chargers look pretty bad too. I think that coach is on the hot seat also, even though he was like the toast of the town last year. They could finish second. They could finish like 9-8 and finish second in their division.
I simultaneously respect and loathe your eternal optimism, okay? Because
That's
it's
fair.
it's an abandonment of any hold-on reality, okay? The Chargers getting Herbert healthier and healthier and healthier are going to improve as the season goes on. The Raiders, I don't think so. We'll see. Maybe. Question mark at best. I think the Broncos aren't going to get any better. They've had some season-ending injuries to very important players. Russell Wilson is trolling all of us because there's no way this guy is that unaware of his situation. But my opinion is that when your ceiling in a season as a professional sports franchise is mediocrity, it becomes about development in the future. It becomes about what's next. It becomes about making sure that you're putting guys in a situation where next year they still want to be part of your franchise, even though this one was a tough one to swallow, and that next year your draft, your free agency situation is more appealing, is promising, is something where you can close the gap between you and the Chiefs.
I just can't believe that we're already talking about. I mean, Josh McDaniels showed in Denver that he wasn't ready to coach. Then he goes like, what? Has it been a decade since Tim Tebow? It's been a decade learning under Belichick, obviously having a lot of success in New England. Then it's his second try. You think he learned from his first time around, and he just doesn't look like he has the locker room. Like those guys are playing for him, and it's ridiculous to be in the first year, not even the first year, the first half of the first year of your contract, and you're already having closed-door meetings with the owner and having to come out and saying, it's all my fault. I didn't have those guys ready to play. Why the bleep not? What the hell were you doing all offseason? What do you mean they're not ready to play? You get Devontae Adams and trading a lot of your future away? That's the other thing. Even if they tank, they don't have any of their picks. They traded them all for Devontae Adams.
You know what the equivalent of, like, Josh McDaniels is one of these. He's like Harrison Barnes in the NBA. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
As a component piece of an otherwise solid and successful coaching staff, he's an asset, right?
Yeah.
When he is not the captain of the ship and he's just your navigator, all right? He's the guy in the crow's nest, land ho. If that's his role, great. He's the kind of guy that you want doing that. Like, some people are not meant to be head coaches.
Yeah.
Right? And they're amazing as QB coaches. They might even be amazing as play callers and whatever else. They're just not meant to be head coaches, right? Just like people in the NBA, like Harrison Barnes and Gordon Hayward, these guys, they're not meant to be the number one all-star option on a team.
Yeah.
Sixth man of the year, sure. Great bench piece, yes. The number 3 scoring option, wow, that is an excellent player that makes everything better. That's what Josh McDaniels is as a coach, okay? He was part of a dynasty in New England. He is a 6-time Super Bowl championship coach. It doesn't mean he knows how to steer a ship himself to that destination, right?
Yeah. Well, to go back to your comparison, Harrison Barnes was great when he was on the Warriors and he had Steph and Clay, and then he goes to the Kings and they want him to be like the man of the squad, and he can't get him anywhere. No, I totally agree. That's a great comparison. McDaniels is great in his role, but he is clearly not great as a head coach, or at least to this point. Now they could. My optimism lies here, right? They're 2-5. If they go 7-3, they finish 9-8. They could squeak in as a wild card like they did last year. Now, a lot of things got to go their way, but 7-3 is not ridiculous. I'm not talking about 10-0. It's not like they're 0-7, but I mean, it's got to turn around, and it's got to turn around ASAP. Now, luckily, you're not playing the Chiefs. You're not playing the Niners right away. You got Jags, Colts, Broncos. That should be 3 games for you to get right and get some momentum going into a tougher part of your schedule where you go to Seattle, at home against the Chargers, at the Rams, et cetera, et cetera. So
we talked about the schedule, and you said Seahawks. I do expect the Raiders to go win in Seattle. Do you still feel that way now that you're looking at this Seattle Seahawks team?
I had no idea that Geno Smith was going to pull this out of his keister. The guy couldn't find a job a couple years ago.
But we had this conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you were not yet bought in. Like, Seahawks are good, man. I hate saying it. I'm a Niners guy, right? The Seahawks are good. They're a good football team.
I know Geno's top 5 in like tons of measurements as a quarterback, but more specifically like quarterback rating or QBR.
It's insane that this season we're talking about obviously Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, but then you start getting like Rodgers is not really in the conversation as much, and Brady's obviously falling out of the conversation. And it's just like, hey, you know who really looks great this year? Tua. And you know who else is amazing? Geno Smith. How about him? And you're like, wait. What's happening in this bizarro world? Now, maybe this is reason for the Raider fans to have faith, because if Geno Smith can do it, like if we went back, rewind to the beginning of the season or prior to the beginning of the season, and you put like futures odds on someone who's going to be league MVP, Derek Carr is certainly going to be shorter odds than Geno Smith.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I wonder if the Seahawks have already hit their over on win total.
I don't know.
The NFL is crazy. Like Brady and Rodgers struggling, and then you have the 2 New York teams who I did not think were going to be good. Last week the only game with 2 winning teams that were playing were the Giants and Seattle, which are 2 teams that people thought were going to be fighting for the top 5 pick in the draft. So, anyways,
I think the Giants are legit. I think the Jets are not, but we'll see.
No, the Giants and the Jets. Yeah. Well, it doesn't look like Zach Wilson, Mr. Hide your mom around that kid. It doesn't look like he's the truth, because they were in that game against the Patriots, but he threw 3 picks. One he was trying to throw away and like couldn't get it out of bounds. I don't know what the hell that was. But one more Raider note before we get to the general NFL, unless you have something else. I was just going to say rest in peace, Ray Guy. Yeah, Hall of Famer. I think he's the only punter in the Hall of Fame.
He was the only pure punter drafted in the first round. If not the only, the first pure punter put in the NFL Hall of Fame. He's actually in 4 Halls of Fame. He's in like the 2 Halls of Fame in the South, right? College Football Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame. Dude's like, he's an absolute legend.
Yeah, and my favorite story that I heard when they were doing like a little thing on him is he was kicking punts so high in the air. I forget which team it was, but the coach asked the referee. This was like Deflategate before Deflategate or whatever. He demanded he demanded the refs inspect the balls to make sure that they hadn't put like, I don't know, like some crazy helium in it, like some sort of like I don't know, cheating somehow. Like the balls were doctored.
Just the most unscientific protest possible. He's just like, I'm pretty sure that's helium. I would have carried that ball high.
Well, they all have helium in them, but All right. Well, let's just go around the NFL since the Raiders discussion is pretty depressing. The Broncos beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. Your boy, Russell Wilson, after doing calisthenics on the plane, came out and got a 21-17 victory over the Jaguars in London. And I watched that game because obviously it comes on before the 10 o'clock games over here. It's on like super early in the morning. So I just kind of had it on in the background. But what I was fascinated by more than anything, first of all, now I don't know if they like give tickets out to make it be packed. I think they probably do. I don't know if football's that popular enough that it's sold out on its own, but it was packed. And what I was fascinated by was just seeing all the different jerseys. It was basically like you were looking at the crowd as if you were looking at the Pro Bowl. There was no, like, it wasn't dominantly Jacksonville, even though Jacksonville usually has their games there. It wasn't the Patriots because they've had the longest reign of success since they've been trying to put it in New England or whatever. It was just it was like a rainbow of jerseys. Like you saw every team pretty much.
Yeah, it's like when they bring premier like club soccer over to the United States, and at Soldier Field is hosting like Arsenal versus Manchester United.
Yeah,
there's like plenty of Arsenal and Manchester United jerseys, but it's also like every MLS team is represented. Someone's wearing like a North Carolina women's soccer jersey. People over there are starting to embrace gridiron, as they like to call American football. But you'd be hard pressed to find the average sports fan in London who has a club, who has a team that they're really super into. And obviously, if that team is over there, they're going to be excited, but you don't get to pick and choose. So if you're interested at all, you're just going to the NFL game because it's there.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty cool. You know, I mean, I would think if they can really get some sort of footing down there, I know there's been talks about them eventually putting a team out there. And I don't know how that would work in terms of the travel, you know, what division they would put him in, how they would go about doing it in terms of that. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it's pretty cool. And I just like seeing England people just loving football. I mean, they were going crazy as if, you know, I mean, I don't know how popular it's actually going to grow. And it's, you know, certainly soccer is always going to be king in every country other than America. But I thought it was cool. Anyways, moving on. I didn't really care about this game, but it was exciting as hell. Atlanta and Carolina. Main reason why I'm bringing it up, OC, is DJ Moore, an incredible catch to tie the game towards the end of the fourth quarter. Rips his helmet off, celebrating. Penalty. They've already moved the extra point back, trying to make it more interesting. But then he gets a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on top of that, moving it even further back, and the kicker smokes the field goal. They go into overtime. Atlanta gets the ball, punts. Carolina comes down. The kicker gets another shot. This time it's like a 32-yarder. He smokes it, and then Atlanta comes down, kicks a field goal, and they win the game in overtime. But I ask you, OC, do you blame DJ Moore for that? All he had to do was wait till he got to the sideline. He could have took his helmet off. Or do you think it's a ticky-tack thing and the rest? I mean, what are you really doing taking your helmet off? Is that really bad? Are you affecting anybody?
No, I think both, okay? The NFL needs to change its taunting and unsportsmanlike conduct penalties because trying to affect games or referees having to affect games because people are saying mean words to each other, these are grown professionals, okay? Like, you should not be able to get a taunting penalty unless you, like, utter hate speech. Like, that's if you look at someone after you sack them and say, F you, who cares? That's a taunting penalty right now. That quarterback's not actually going to cry about it, right? The referee doesn't actually get offended that he hears that language. Nobody at home actually believes that these players aren't cursing at each other during the game. So it annoys me that we're so ticky-tack with unsportsmanlike conduct and with taunting penalties in the NFL. But if you're a professional and you're a guy who has to understand the scenario that your team is in, right? You're trying to win a football game, and they're hard to come by in the National Football League, those wins. And you score a big play. Like, you can't regulate your emotions long enough to step onto the chalk before you rip your helmet off. That's just silliness. I know that it's a ticky-tack penalty, but so do you. You know that it's a ticky-tack penalty. So you are willingly shirking your responsibility to execute all the way and to protect your team, to do good things for your team, and you rip your helmet off knowing that that's going to be a penalty. And then
Yeah,
you complain about it.
I don't think there should be any penalty ever unless it's something totally obscene or if you physically touch a player on the other team. Taking your helmet off, who gives a damn? Who are you affecting? You're not hurting anybody. It's just some stupid rule that they have in place because they want to govern the players. Yeah, I don't know. To me, the whole thing, I mean, I do blame him. Yes, you need to know and you need to be smarter. You know the rules, so don't do it. Wait till you get to the sideline. At the same time, it's stupid and it shouldn't be enforced, and I wish that they would change it. Anyways, we move on. Chicago and Dallas. Dallas whoops them up 49-29. You have any belief in America's team, OC, or is this just a bad Bears team?
Well, it's a bad Bears team, and you know it's a bad Bears team because the bigger story here than just like the scores in these games is that the trade deadline in the NFL actually saw some really significant movement. This was a big week, and the Bears were fire sailing on defense, right? I mean, they got rid of Robert Quinn, then they traded off Roquan Smith. This is a Bears team who's just like, we gotta plan for the future. We have our guy at QB, we like him, all right. We gotta stockpile so we can get some talent.
But then didn't they trade for the Pittsburgh wideout?
They got Chase Claypool, but they got a great value there because Chase Claypool's a malcontent and he was unhappy in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh was going to have to cut him or get rid of him anyway because Mike Tomlin suffers no such foolishness. There's no bad culture guys in Pittsburgh, right? So if you give him the impression that you're going to create chemistry problems, that you're not going to be a team player, he will trade you for a pack of cigarettes. So they got that's an offload that the Steelers were willing to engage in regardless of what they got back.
Let's move on to Miami, Detroit. Detroit just finds a way to lose games. And of course, this was fitting. I thought the Lions were going to be jacked up and motivated. It was Barry Sanders Day. I don't know what they did exactly, but they had his number. I mean, I'm sure his number's already been retired, but they did some sort of ceremony for him. I couldn't exactly see what. Maybe they did retire his number that day. I'm not sure, but they had his number all stretched out across the field. He came out on the field, did the coin toss, blah, 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 blah. Detroit looked motivated, went up 14-0, went up 14 again. At halftime, it ended up being 27-17, and then they didn't score in the second half. And Miami scored twice. They win 31-27. Tua didn't get concussed. That's always good for the Dolphins. My biggest takeaway, other than the Lions finding ways to lose every week, is that if Tua could hit Tyreek Hill in stride, Tyreek Hill, who's already on pace to break Calvin Johnson's record for most receiving yards in a season, would be that much closer because the amount of times he has to come back for the ball. Now, sometimes in Tua's defense, I think he does it strategically. Either there's a safety over the top that's coming over, or he hasn't quite beat the cornerback. Tyreek Hill hasn't beat the cornerback that much, so playing a ball where he has to come back and jump up for it, I think sometimes he does on purpose, but sometimes he clearly does not. Sometimes there's not a safety, and he has beaten the DB. He just doesn't have that kind of arm strength. But did you take anything away from that game?
I mean, the only thing I take away from, you're right, the Lions stink. We all watch Hard Knocks, and we're like, hey, this Dan Campbell guy's pretty cool. Like, seems like he'd be a fun guy to play for. But winning is all that matters. So
I think he's another guy like you're saying, OC. I think he'd be a great defensive coordinator, a rah-rah guy that you want on your sidelines. But at some point, you got to be seriously a good coach and not just the guy that will talk about ripping off your kneecaps and, if you knock me down, we're going to knock you in the teeth. All that stuff is fine and good, but you need a professional head coach like a Mike Tomlin or like a John Harbaugh or something like that. And I don't think he has the chops for that. I think it's another classic example of a good coordinator, not a great coach.
Well, it's also Detroit is an accursed franchise that even with Hall of Fame players was never able to win anything significant. So, I mean, I like Jared Goff. I've always liked Jared Goff, but with him, you couldn't do it with Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford leaves for 5 minutes and has a Super Bowl trophy. I mean, you had you had Megatron, one of the most unique talents in the history of the NFL. You were never able to win anything significant with those guys on the roster together, right? So, if you're putting on your resume, I want to be a head coach in the NFL. You should put an asterisk next to it and say, I want to be a head coach in the NFL anywhere except Detroit, because you can't succeed there. And you might not be able to succeed with the New York Jets either. I think that they're not too far behind. Robert Saleh has done a better job than most people. But you don't want to go to Detroit. I don't think you really want to go to Jacksonville, although they have some talent right now.
Cleveland.
Cleveland is just a vacuum, a soul-sucking vacuum of hopes and dreams and talents, right?
Yeah.
So, like, to be fair to anyone who wears the head coach's hat in Detroit, like, you might be a great whatever, and then you get there and your legs are cut out from under you. So,
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
how's this for a comparison? I'm going to compare the Lions with the Portland Trailblazers. The Lions, known for one of the greatest running backs of all time retiring way too early, and one of the greatest wide receivers of all time retiring way too early. And the Portland Trailblazers, known for drafting Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan and Greg Oden over Kevin Durant. Those how's that for a comparison? The Detroit Lions and the Portland Trailblazers. Somehow I found a way to compare the two. All right, let's move on. We already did.
To extend your comparison, though, also Portland had like Clyde Drexler, Hall of Famer, one of the top 50 players in history, dream teamer. Never were able to do anything with it, right? Damian Lillard, like amazing competitor, great all-star, never able to do anything with it. You're onto something there. The trip.
It's random, but it is what it is. All right.
Are they sister cities? Are those two sister cities?
I guess so. I don't think many times Detroit's associated with Portland, but who knows? All right. I'm very interested to get your opinion on this because for once in my life, OC, I have no opinion. I could not tell you one way or the other. The Minnesota Vikings beat the Arizona Cardinals 34-26 and proved to what I believe is 6-1. Is this a different year, or is this Groundhog Day, OC, and is Kirk Cousins going to get to the playoffs, probably have a home playoff game, and lose in either the first round or maybe the second round?
So probably that. The cruelty for the Minnesota Vikings fans is that they're believing now. Okay, I have my older brother is a huge Minnesota Vikings fan, right? He's believing.
Because of Randy Moss?
I got a job offer in Minneapolis, and so I followed a bunch of like the dudes out there, so I could like figure out, if that's the place I wanted to be at, doing sports talk radio, whatever. A couple of the program directors. I follow, so now on Twitter I follow a bunch of those guys, right? So I see the conversations happening in Vikings country, the Purple Daily podcast, all of it, and they're starting to believe. People who were staunch Kirk Cousins haters and were just like, this guy is how I am with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? It's fool's gold. He's going to get you somewhere and he's never going to win you anything. People who were just like, get rid of this guy are starting to believe in the year of our Lord 2022. And it is going to come back and destroy them when the playoffs happen. Because they're going to have a great regular season. And he's going to step on his own dick in the playoffs, and all of a sudden they're going to be early exit, and they won't have a good draft position, and everyone's going to be like, what did we do?
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I have. I mean, they look a little different. They look a little better, but not enough for me to think that it's not just going to happen the same way that it's been happening over the past however many years Kirk has been there, 4 or 5 or whatever. We touched on New England and the Jets. We could do Pittsburgh, Philly. Now, Philly's played since last Sunday. They played last night and beat up on the Texans. But the week before, they slapped up the Steelers 35-13. Undefeated. Pittsburgh, it looks like it might be Mike Tomlin's first year with a record below 500. And the Eagles, OC, are they for real? Because if you look at the teams that they've played, they haven't exactly been beaten up on a bunch of Goliaths,
Correct, but you only play who's in front of you.
True.
And they don't have that head scratcher like, what happened here, lost yet, right? That happens to everyone in the NFL at some point. And they don't have that yet. So they're believing. They don't really have anything terribly formidable in the immediate future either, right? So, I mean, we might get to December before we're talking about a Philadelphia loss. How about that? Like, that's that's not insignificant.
Yeah, I was looking at, you know how ESPN does that chances, a percentage chance of winning. They do it like mid game too. I always find that funny when there's a huge comeback because it'll be like 100% all the way, and then all of a sudden it just drops down to zero. But I was looking at that, and I mean, I think that they were favored to win every game except for at Dallas, which I believe is their next game. Um, so yeah, I mean, I feel like they're probably going to stumble somewhere around there. The thing about the NFC is that with Brady and Aaron Rodgers falling off the way that they have, it's so wide open that the Niners season that looked like it was lost at certain points. You know, they have some bad losses on their schedule, and we'll get to them in a moment. But yeah, so they beat Houston, then they have at home against Washington, at the Colts, and then it's at home against Green Bay, at home against Tennessee. Tennessee's turned once they figured out stop letting Tannehill throw the ball and just give the ball to Derrick Henry. I think they're like won 4 straight or 5 straight. Then they're at New York. That could be tough. At Chicago, probably not. Then at Dallas. That was the only one where they were not favored. And then at home against New Orleans, at home against New York.
We'll
so,
see.
yeah, we could be talking about December.
Yeah,
like
we'll
you said.
see. I was looking at that December 11th game in New York and saying, like, that's one because if the Giants continue to show what they have been showing, then that might be a pick 'em or that might be, a slight edge in favor of the Giants by the time we get there. But in any case, right, these are all winnable games. Even that's a very winnable game. Even at Dallas is a very winnable game. And this Philadelphia Eagles team has, I think, a really quality mix of, like, highly established veteran players at important positions, right? Great leaders who are good teammates who have helped these young guys come along. They drafted well. So, I mean, I don't like watching the Eagles play, but I don't like the city of Philadelphia at all. Philadelphia fans are the worst, and they're spoiled in sports, right? So,
threw batteries at Santa.
They got a team in the World Series right now. Like, I don't want to see the Eagles be a Super Bowl contender, but I think they might be.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to find a weakness in their team, but I don't know. Part of me in the back of the head, same thing with the Seahawks. I don't know. Part of me doesn't fully believe. All right, I don't want to talk about Mills or the Titans or the Texans. The Titans are now 5-2. Like I said, they've been running the ball now. I think they ran off 4 straight. But I don't want to talk about them unless you do. And then Commanders, Colts. I don't want to talk about Heineke, who, by the way, should get some sponsorship with Heineken or something. But the Commanders beat the Colts 17-16. I don't want to talk about that unless you do.
We don't need to talk about that. We do need to talk about the possibility that the Commanders are going to be owned by somebody new in 2023.
Aha. That is very true. And I wonder who it's going to be.
Jeff Bezos is who it's going to be.
Oh, man. Have you heard rumors of that?
I mean, as soon as Dan Snyder hired Bank of America to explore sale possibilities, he got 4 phone calls with interested buyers. You know how much he's going to charge for this purchase?
Probably $4.5 billion.
In the neighborhood of 6.
Damn.
I think they're valued right now the 6th highest NFL franchise value of anyone because of where.
Wow. Really?
Right. Now they're going to need a new stadium. They're exploring new stadium possibilities. Part of the District of Columbia, the DC, allowing that. They were like, you gotta get rid of the Redskins name, which they obviously did. But now you've got an opportunity, right? If you're one of these people with billions of dollars hanging around, and there's about 1,000 of them in the United States of America. But I mean, for Bezos, for Elon Musk, for some of these guys, like that's chump change. Like $6 billion, you can pull that out of your couch, right? And you have an opportunity to do a full rebrand, to be the savior of a beloved franchise. If you're really interested in that, I wouldn't be surprised to see an absurd level of investment now that Amazon and the NFL have a formal partnership with Thursday Night Football, right? The NFL and the owners can't exactly say, we don't want to be in business with Amazon, because you already are, right? So If Bezos says, yeah, $6 billion, that's easy for me, let's do this, then everybody else in the NFL should start shaking in their boots, because what Amazon is capable of doing, what Jeff Bezos is capable of doing, is he's capable of just plucking everyone that he thinks is best and paying them more than what they're making now. Is that a permanent solution? Is that an instant fix? Even we'll see. But one of the beauties of paying a slight amount of attention to like European soccer, right, is you'll see some of these big time franchises. They're just like, oh man, okay, we're having some struggles here. You know what I want? I want the best player. And they're like, oh yeah, he already plays for Manchester United. I'm going to pay a $200 million transfer fee to get him over here. And I know the NFL is different, and I know the NFL has different contract and salary requirements and things like that. But you can start doing that with GMs. You can start doing that with coaches. You can do that with player development guys. And all of a sudden, the Commanders franchise, under new ownership, because the old ownership has been blamed for their struggles for a very long time, under new ownership, the Commanders in our nation's capital could potentially be like a resurgent franchise. And you can change the name, by the way, to something that's not so stupid, because that's not, first of all, that's got Dan Snyder's stinky little hands all over it. And you put out new name that people like, you put out new merchandise, that's a huge revenue bump in the first year. That is a story, man. Washington being for sale, it's a big deal.
All right, well, you ran your mouth so long, you stole my thunder. I was going to say, I hope the first thing that they do is change the damn name. And what they should do, I understand that Redskins is a slur. I understand that. Now, I hate the people that want to go after the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sorry, Chief is not an insult, okay? Chief is just fine. So what I think Washington should do is find another Native American term for like a warrior or something that is positive, something that is praising Native Americans, and choose that. Commanders got to go. Anyways, it'll be interesting because like if you look at the Mets and Steve Cohen, he doesn't care. He doesn't give a damn about the luxury tax, you know? And so, you know, Bezos, he's not going to care if he gets penalized. I mean, now you can only go over a certain amount. So you can't go crazy like baseball, but still, it'll be interesting to see what a team owned by him would do. All right, now before we get to your Niners, because I know you're excited, do you have anything on Packers Bills? I don't think Aaron Rodgers had a 3-game losing streak in a long time, and I don't think he had ever had a 4-game losing streak. Anyways, the Packers go from 3-1 to 3-5, lose to the Bills in Buffalo, and then the Bengals lose to the Browns. What a difference Jamar Chase makes. Do you have anything on those two games before we get to your precious 49ers?
Well, I think Joe Burrow is an excellent quarterback, but every time we've seen Joe Burrow be excellent, it's because of who he's been able to throw to, right? He's not one of these guys who can deal with, the converted lacrosse cat and the guy who played quarterback in his college career at Kent State and turned them into all-pro wide receivers. And Joe Burrow has not graduated to that level yet. He needs Jamar Chase. He needs big-time talents to be on the opposite end of his throws, and they got to get people back, or they got to figure out something, because I like Joe Burrow a lot, but he's not a guy who does it without help, and they need to get him the help he needs.
Yeah, well, I loved his press conference where he basically said, you know, the football's a crazy game. Last week they're talking about greatest offense ever. You know, we're in the Super Bowl, and now they're talking about are the Bengals even going to make the playoffs? They are only 4-4. So that's a little bit of a surprise because Chase has only missed 1 game, which means they were only 4-3 before that.
It's actually not that big of a surprise, because if you look at how many teams make it to the Super Bowl and try and go back, like you go through history, there's a lot of teams that miss the playoffs the next year after losing the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, it's the Super Bowl hangover, or not the ones that win, but the ones that make it and lose. But yeah, and then Bills Packers. You got anything on that? I mean, are the Packers done? 3-5. They still have A-Rod, but the wide receiver thing does not seem to be going away. You saw the trade deadline come and go. The Packers are just hell bent on not surrounding him with any sort of weapons. I don't know what's going on there, but I mean, it doesn't look like it's getting any better.
No, and I don't think it will. I think that the best days of Packer football with Aaron Rodgers at the helm are in the rearview mirror. I think they can still be a playoff team this year. Obviously, he's incredible, but he's also, I think, turned his focus away from football a little bit. I know that people talked about that like 2 years ago when he was starting to do like the Jeopardy auditions and stuff like that. I was like, man, that's fine. Let the guy do what he wants to do in an off season. Now, though, he seems to spend a lot more of his time uh, doing like Pat McAfee and all that kind of stuff during the season than he used to. I think that he enjoys being a conservative mouthpiece in a liberal sports media world, and that's taken some of his focus away from football. It's that time in his life, He's 40 years old. He's like us. It's like time for him to move on to something else. I think the best days of his quarterbacking in Green Bay are over.
Yeah. Well, he also went to the jungle and took a hallucinogen and said that his dead family members were caressing his body. And he's a different kind of cat.
Hey, you know
But
what? Have you ever like known someone pre ayahuasca and post ayahuasca trips?
no.
I've known a couple people, and I know that people swear by it and they love it, and that there's a lot of research right now that it can help with Alzheimer's and it can help with CTE and it can help with a bunch of things, right? And so there's a lot more. I am not the most well-read person on it, but my personal experience, and it's only my experience, is I've known some people who pre ayahuasca were what you would call like your everyday average normal people who talked about normal things and thought about normal things, and then they go and they get invited by some shaman and they go to the jungle and they do these psychedelic trips, and they never are the same person again. It changes your brain chemistry, and that's why people like it. They don't want to be the same person again, right? But it's not always a positive change, and sometimes things get weird, and I don't know how weird it's gotten for Aaron Rodgers, but I've known people where it's really shifted their priorities and it's changed what they care about in life and what they talk about and what they think about and how they dress and how they wear their hair and how they act. And it's like they become slightly different or seriously different. So maybe that's happening to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had any experience of anybody that I knew doing that specific drug, but definitely like mushrooms or other stuff. And you can just tell that they're, I wouldn't say off, but like you said, just different. Their focus has shifted. And like you said, it could be anything. It could be the way they wear their hair, the way that they dress, the way that they act, what their priorities are, what they talk about, all that stuff. I mean, it's a reason why it's called like a mind altering drug, because it alters your mind. And sometimes for a short period of time, sometimes for a long period of time. But moving on, because I know you can't wait to get to this. I saved the best for last for you. This was like the sports eclipse. What do they call it when like everything's on one day? When there's like a football game, a basketball game, a hockey game, like it's like called a sports eclipse or whatever. Anyways, McCaffrey had the personal version of that as he caught a touchdown,
Mm-hmm.
which you could expect. He ran for a touchdown, which he's a running back, you'd normally expect, but he also threw for one. And this is what I think not only John Lynch, not only Shanahan, but the Niner fan base, when they found out that they traded for C-Mac, there was all this hype about it. And obviously the first week, he's got to get accustomed and acclimated to the new environment and the playbook. It was like 3 days that he had to get ready for it. But this was what everybody envisioned. Shanahan's genius play calling with the Swiss Army knife that is C-Mac. OC, how juiced were you to see them to thump the Rams, which technically was a road game, but you saw more red than you saw yellow and blue in the stands?
Because there's not real Charger fans and there's not real Ram fans in LA. Okay, it's just the way things are. But I look, you go back and listen to the last Silver and Zach podcast, and I said this is pressure for Shanahan. So he's either going to utilize this tool or he's going to crumble under the pressure of trying to figure out how to utilize this tool. And if that game is an example, start the parade floats now. Like this guy is so versatile. The hat trick, as you mentioned, throw, run for, and catch a touchdown. Big for fantasy owners, by the way. No, this is what you wanted. And thankfully, it's what you got in really his first real week as a San Francisco 49er. Now, will he do it again? Probably not anytime soon. But other teams are going to have to start scheming for it and trying to figure it out. And how long has Taysom Hill been doing this type of stuff? Where he's like positionless football. How long has he been doing it for New Orleans? 4 years now?
Yeah.
And no one's really solved the puzzle yet. So if C-Mac can do that with the help of Shanahan, then it's going to be a very serious weapon. And by the way, McCaffrey is a much more talented overall player than Taysom Hill. So I don't mean to like besmirch with that kind of a comparison. So look, I'm pumped about it. I'm ecstatic about it. Fun little side note, right? Christian McCaffrey had to choose which number to wear when he got traded to the San Francisco 49ers. He was 5 in college. He was 22 with the Carolina Panthers, right? Both of those numbers already taken. Trey Lance is in 5, and Jeff Wilson was number 22 for the San Francisco 49ers. C-Mac chooses 23, goes with 23, right? Plays for 1.5 weeks. After 1.5 weeks, the guy wearing number 22 gets traded. And now C-Mac can take his old number, but he's going to stick with 23.
Oh, well, yeah, if he did, think about how many more, I mean, because they've already probably sold tons of 23 C-Mac jerseys. They'd probably sell a ton of 22. Should switch just to get them more money back. But, yeah, I mean, just an incredible game. I continue to be baffled. Look, I get it. The NFL force-fed L.A. to have 2 teams because L.A. is L.A. It's a top 5 market. But they haven't had teams in forever. They're certainly not going to warm up to the Chargers. The San Diego people are pissed, so they're not going to follow them up to L.A. And then, L.A. in general is just, it's Hollywood. It's fake. They're not going to be diehard fans, but it's crazy to see how little home field event. You would think the Super Bowl would have gotten people to be loyal and to be more hardcore fans. But no, they've got like a premiere to go watch or to go attend some whatever concert. There's so much stuff to do in LA that nobody is really going to be hardcore. But yeah, I mean, it was basically a home game, and like the players talk about it openly. It's just it's a shame. I mean, you don't feel for the Rams players or whatever. They're getting paid tons of money and they're the defending Super Bowl champs. But it's got to be rough playing in your own arena and, hearing cheers when the other team scores.
It's wild. And I've been to a game at that place. It is a cathedral of sports beauty, right? I mean, that's one of the premier facilities in any sport anywhere in the world. And to have it be like neutral territory, it's really a bummer.
Yeah. Well, it should be interesting. As I said, the AFC, I mean, if you're a Dolphins fan, wink, wink, what a rough year to be a contender. I mean, you go all in, you trade for Tyreek Hill, you bring in the new coach from San Francisco, and Tua's finally looking like a franchise quarterback. You got Waddle, which you nailed that pick. By the way, the Niners trade, I don't know if you saw the graphic. The Niners traded the Dolphins 3 first-round picks for the Trey Lance pick, turned into Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Nick Chubb. So basically, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Nick Chubb for Trey Lance, who's out for the year and played half a game. So not so bad for the Dolphins, but you look at the AFC, you got the Bills, Titans, Chiefs, Ravens, and that's with, the Bengals being 4-4 and the Chargers not looking as good as people thought with Herbert at 4-3. So, I mean, the AFC is pretty much stacked. And then you go to the NFC, and the Niners are all the way down at 7 at 4-4 because of a couple of, who were their 2 ugly losses? Atlanta's not looking like a terrible loss anymore because Atlanta's looking pretty good with Mariota. But they had an earlier one. Oh, yeah, they lost to the Bears. That was rough. And they lost to the Broncos 11-10. So a couple of brutal losses for the Niners. But they find themselves at 4-4. The Eagles at 8-0 are running away with it. We talked about the Vikings 6-1, but the NFC just seems to be more open to me than the AFC.
Yeah, I won't dispute that. I think that I like that a lot, right? The NFC, like there was a consolidation of power for a while in the NFC, and now all the great quarterbacks are in the AFC, which has changed the dynamic somewhat.
Yep.
NFC that's the uphill climb for the NFC right now. They gotta try to get on par with the AFC young quarterback talent because all the young cats, Burrow and Allen and Mahomes and company, They're all in the AFC right now.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. All right. Well, Raiders in Jacksonville. Thankfully, Jacksonville, Florida, not Miami, Florida, so they won't find themselves in any. I don't think there's a lot of trouble to get into in Jacksonville. Knock on wood. But hopefully they can start to turn this thing around, and we can have a different narrative for the next podcast. For Sean O'Connell on Twitter at Real OC Sports, I am Zachariah at Zak Sports, ZAK Sports. You've been listening to the Silver and Zach podcast. We'll see you next week. Holla!